Hi everyone, welcome back. In this tutorial, we are diving into one of the most useful features in Excel, data validation. Whether you want to create drop-down lists, control text length, restrict numbers or dates, or even set up dependent drop-downs using the indirect function, this feature helps you keep your data clean and accurate. I'll also show you how to quickly spot errors using the circle invalid data option. By the end of this video, you'll be able to set up professional data entry rules in Excel with ease. So let's get started. Let's now move to the agenda items. Here is a list of items we are going to learn today. We'll start with list validation, then text length validation. We will explore the circle invalid data option. Then we move on to the date, whole number, and decimal validation. And finally, dependent data validation using the indirect function. I will demonstrate each of these validation methods using an example. So let's move to the list validation. The purpose of list validation is to ensure you enter only the permitted values or predefined values. And anything outside of the predefined values are rejected. And an error message is displayed to the user. Optionally, you can customize this error message according to your needs. Let us try it out. On the left side of the worksheet, you can see valid branch list table. These are our predefined values. And to the right side is the data table column called branch. The requirement here is to ensure any text entered into this column should be one of the predefined value from the valid branch list. So let us set up the validation rule. Now, the validation rule can be set up only for few rows in the column. For example, I'm going to set up validation rule only for the few rows of this column, or you can set up the validation rule for the entire column. In this case, I'm going to set up the rule only for few rows. So select the rows for which you want to set up the validation rule. Now click the data tab, and in the ribbon, you can see the data tools buttons here. Now click on the data validation button on the top. A data validation dialog pops up. The settings tab is the default tab. Under this, select the drop down and then select the list option. Next, select the source box here and then select the items under valid branch list. As you can see, I have selected all the items under valid branch list, and this serves as the source of validation. So any data entered in the branch column will be validated against this list. Now press OK. Now as you can see, there appears a drop-down button to the end of each cell. You can select any cell and you can see a drop-down appears for each of the cells. So this means you can select only values from this list. You cannot enter any values outside of this list. Now suppose you try to enter a value outside of this list. For example, let me type Bangalore and press enter. You can see Excel does not allow you to enter Bangalore because it is not part of the validation list. And it throws an error message saying the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this column. So press cancel. Now you can either select the value from the drop-down list or type a valid value manually. For example, you can type Delhi. And since Delhi is one of the items in the validation list, Excel allows you to type the value. Now you can customize the error according to your needs. So what you can do is select the entire list again. Now again click the data validation button. Now there is a tab called input message here. Now this is a message to the user which provides some information about the validation. For example, I can put title as branch and then I can put an input message, for example, select branch from the drop down. and press OK. Now, as you can see, the message appears when I select this cell, and it provides some kind of a visual cue to the user saying that the items in this list must be selected from the dropdown. Now you can also set up your customized error message. Again, select the list of items, then click the button on the top. Now go to the third tab here called error alert. Here you can type any title as per your requirement. I can provide a title called again branch, and you can type an error message as per your need. For example, I can type only branch values from the drop down are allowed. Select the title to be more precise. So let me type it as branch selection error. And then the action is stop. We are not going to allow the user to proceed with the data entry. So press OK now. Now let me try to enter invalid data. For example, again, let me attempt typing Bangalore here and press enter. And as you can see here, the message says branch selection error. Only branch values from the dropdown are allowed. So this clearly gives a proper direction to the user so that he can understand the error and take action accordingly. After list validation, let us now move to the text length validation. I will switch to the next sheet. In the table on the left side, I have set up two values, min length and max length. These values indicate the minimum and maximum length of the text allowed in all the cells where this rule is applied. On the right side, I have a data table containing employee names, and the column next to it indicates the length of each employee name. Let us now go ahead and set up the validation rule. Now select the employee name table. Ensure that you are on the data tab. Next, locate the data validation button and click on the data validation button. Now the data validation dialog pops up. In the settings tab, click the drop down and select text length item. When you select that, you get a drop down here. Let this be between. Then you have minimum value box and the maximum value box. So select the minimum value box here, and then on the sheet behind, select the cell A5, which contains the value 11. So this is our minimum length. So now let us go back to the minimum value box and press F4 to make it an absolute reference. Now select the maximum value box, and then on the sheet behind, select the cell B5, which contains the maximum length. Now go back to the maximum value box and then press F4 to make it an absolute reference. This completes the setup of the validation rule. You can customize the input message, and based on your requirement, you can put the title here and the input message. You can also customize the error alert, and based on your requirement, put the title here and also a custom error message. So now press OK. After this is done, let us attempt to enter a value. For example, let me type John. Since John does not fit the validation criteria, the Excel brings up an error dialog, which means that the user cannot input this data. So cancel this. Let me change the value to John Smith and press enter. John Smith also does not meet the criteria. Let me make it as John A. Smith. Now this is accepted because the validation rule succeeds for this input and it meets the criteria of minimum length and maximum length. The validation rule ensures that the new data we enter in the cell meets the validation criteria. What about the pre-existing data? How are we going to check those? So this is where the circle invalid data feature will help. Now, to check for any pre-existing data that does not meet the criteria, first select the entire table and then on the data tab, select the dropdown here, the data validation dropdown, and then click the circle invalid data item. As soon as you do that, Excel validates all the selected cells against the validation rule set up for the table and highlights all those cells where the validation rule is not met by circling them in red. You can review these values and then accordingly take action. Let us now move to the date validation, whole number and decimal validation. I switch to the next sheet. The date, whole number and decimal validation is very similar to text length validation. The only difference here is that we apply this rule to the values of each cell. So we will start with the date validation. So on the left side, you can see I have set up the validation rule here, the fin year start and fin year end. So the start value is 1st April 2023 and the end value is 31 March 2024. I want to apply this rule on the data table here. The doc date is our data table. It already contains some data. So let us select the contents of this table and then click the data validation button on the screen here. In the settings dialog, in the drop-down, select date. Now, as soon as you do that, you get an option called data. Under the data, there are multiple values. You can explore and use any of these as per your requirement. For now, I will select between. Now, when you select between, you have two dates, the start date and the end date. Our start date will come from this cell A5. So I selected the cell A5. Now convert this to an absolute reference by pressing F4. The end date will come from the cell B5. Again, convert this to an absolute reference and press OK. We have set up the rule now. I can enter a data and check if this rule is working. So let me try 01/03/2023. This is not an acceptable input because it does not meet the fin year start criteria. Now let me try out 05 April 2024. Even this does not fit the criteria because it exceeds the fin year end criteria. Now let me try to input a valid value. Let's say 5th of September 2023. So this is accepted because it meets both the fin year start and fin year end criteria. Let us now move on to the whole number validation. Whole number validation is very similar to the date validation. Now we only deal with whole number or an integer value. So the min and the max value have already been set up here. Now let me select the whole number table and then click the data validation button here. Now in the settings dialog, under the drop down, select whole number and keep the data value in between. And now select the minimum value. Let's say the minimum value is coming from A16. Convert this to absolute reference. Select the maximum value box. Maximum value is coming from cell B16. Now click here and again convert this to an absolute reference. Once this is set up, you can optionally set up an input message based on your requirement and an error alert again based on your requirement. Now press OK. Now let us try to input a value. If I input value 5 is not accepted because it is less than the minimum value. Now if I try to input 45 also is not accepted because it exceeds the maximum value. So if I put a value, let's say 35, 35 is accepted, 22 accepted, 39 accepted. Now there are values like 9. If you want to check pre-existing values, like I demonstrated before, you can select the entire data table, go to the data validation drop-down and click the circle invalid data. So this will go through each and every cell in the sheet where the rules are applied and checks the cell value against the validation rule. Let me clear the validation circles. Now finally, we are going to learn about decimal validation. The decimal validation is very similar to whole number validation, except for the fact that it deals with decimal number. So again, I have already set up the min value and the max value. Now select the data table here and then click the data validation button. Again, repeat the same process, but this time in the drop down, select the decimal as the list item and keep the data value in between. Now select the minimum box and on the sheet behind, select A26, which is our minimum value, and convert that to an absolute reference. Then click the maximum value box and on the sheet behind, select the maximum value in cell B26. Again, convert this to an absolute reference, press OK. Before pressing, you can optionally enter the input message as per your needs and also an alert message. Press OK. Now you can test out the validation rule. Let me put 3.999. 3.999 does not meet the minimum criteria, so it is discarded. Now let me put 5 here. 5 is acceptable. Let me put 30. That is acceptable. 35.366 is not acceptable because it exceeds the max value. Cancel. If I try to put some value which is within the limits, it again accepts. Let us now learn about dependent data validation. This is a very useful feature, but less often used. Let me switch to the tab here. In this example, we'll create a dependent dropdown in Excel, where the choices in the second list change based on what you pick in the first. We will do this using the indirect function inside data validation. Observe the table on the left side. The table contains the country column. In this column, I have USA, Japan, France. The second, third, and the fourth column contains the country names header, and under each country name, we have a list of offices. For example, under USA, we have offices in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Under Japan, we have offices in Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto, and so on. The table on the right side has two columns, country and office. The value for the country column should come from the list built from the first table, which is our reference table. That means the value for this column should come from this list. So it should either show USA, Japan, or France when I select the cell. The value for the office column will come again from the same reference table from one of the columns, USA, Japan, or France, depending on what value is chosen for the country column. For example, if I select USA here and click the office column, I should have options to select one of the values under USA. That means the office cell should list New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. Similarly, if I select Japan as the country here, in the next cell, I should have values Tokyo, Osaka, or Kyoto in the drop-down. So that is our requirement. So let us start with creating names. We will use these names to set up validation rules. To begin creating the names, first go to the Formulas tab. Now select the entire table here. Select the headers, country, USA, Japan, France, and also the data under these headers. and then click Create from Selection button here. Uncheck the left column. Make sure you have checked the top row and then click OK. Now the names have been created. To verify what has been created, under each name, select the name manager. And then as you see here on the dialog, the country is one of the name. Under country, we have three values: USA, Japan, and France. It matches the value in the table. Under France, we have Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. It again matches the France column. Likewise, we have values under Japan and USA. We will use these names to set up the validation rule. Now to set up the validation rule, select the country table and then click the data tab on the top of the window and then click data validation button. Now in the settings tab, click the drop down and select list. Click the source box and then press F3. When you press F3, a pop-up appears with a list of names which we just created. Select the country item and press OK. Essentially what this does is, the value for the country column will come from the country list that we just built. Press OK. Now you can verify that each of these cells shows a list box when you click. I can select USA here. I can select Japan. I can select France. And as per our requirement, the dropdown only contains the value which we need. Now let us build the validation rule for the office column. Select the office column here and then again click the data validation button. Under the settings dialog, in the list box, select the list item again. Select the source box. Now in this box, type is equal to indirect. Open the bracket. Select the cell G6. Now what we are telling Excel here is the value for the office column is coming from the name USA. And we have already created the name called USA. And under USA, we have values like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. So this indirect function will fetch the value from this list. So when USA is selected, the indirect function will fetch the value under USA. If Japan is selected, Excel will fetch the values under Japan. Finally, we need to convert the absolute reference G6 into a mixed reference. To do that, press F4. Once again, press F4. By doing this, we are fixing the column G and allowing the row to vary. That means for each of the rows, the validation will be applied based on the selection in the previous column. Now close the bracket. Press OK. Now as soon as you close the dialog, a drop-down appears here. And you can see the value is what we expect for USA. So under USA, we have offices in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Now I can select a different office here. I can select France. So under France, we have offices in Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. Likewise, under Japan, we have offices in Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto. So this demonstrates dependent data validation using indirect function, a very useful function.